welcome in. We are very excited to have y'all today. This is a very exciting masterclass here with our Spotify for Artists winners. So yeah, just as everyone's filtering into the room here, we'll kick off shortly because we've got a lot of material to cover and some very excited panelists here who are going to share a bit of insights for y'all, hopefully be an educational opportunity for everyone involved. But to kick off first, I want to acknowledge that this was obviously scheduled to happen a couple weeks ago. And unfortunately, that had to be rescheduled for obvious reasons. So I want to acknowledge first those tragic wildfires that impacted our community in the greater Los Angeles area, and all those that were impacted by the fires. Sending love out to everyone who happened to be impacted by that. Also, just wanted to shout out, as we have coming up on the screen now, that in addition to donations that we made directly to Music Cares and Fire Aid, Spotify for Artists has joined forces with GoFundMe to support and highlight fundraisers dedicated to helping members of the artist and music community who've been impacted by these fires. So we're working to verify and feature as many fundraisers as possible to support artists and members of the music community who've been impacted by this devastating event. So a few more details: you can use the QR code on the screen right now to access the GoFundMe page, or you can donate directly, or you can submit a fundraiser information to be featured on the page as well. We're promoting the GoFundMe directly in the Spotify app, but artists can also feature the page or any GoFundMe within the fan support feature, which is accessible within Spotify for Artists. So I'm going to leave this on here for a second so that folks can scan that QR code, and then we will get rolling so we can get into the meat of it. Cool. Sweet. All right, we'll start with some introductions. I'm going to be the host for today. My name is Jesse. I have been at Spotify for about 5 years now, working on the label partnerships team. So partnering with independent labels and major labels to help market their artists on Spotify, help educate artists on the opportunities to connect on Spotify and to reach their fans. So very excited to be here with y'all, and I've worked across a number of these label groups, and we have quite the loaded panel today. So I'll make some introductions, and as I'm going through, it's probably easiest, we'll start with a fun icebreaker question. So after I've introduced you, if you want to jump in and share, outside of the releases that you worked on, what your favorite release of 2024 was, would love to hear what everyone was listening to last year and probably carried over into this year. All right, so we'll kick it off. I'm going to first introduce Karina Amaguer, who has been working at Sony Music Mexico for 8 years, during which she consistently focused on the digital business areas as a senior account manager. Her focus remains on ensuring that local and international releases have significant impact in Mexico, and the award that she is here representing is the Standout pre-release strategy for Pink Aura by Kenya OS. So Karina, what was your favorite release of 2024?
Hi, Jesse. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Mexico. I absolutely love Latin music, and artists such as Shakira inspire me so much. Her creativity and impact on the global music scene are truly remarkable. So probably some of the tracks that Shakira released last year were my top. So that's for me.
Oh, that's a great one. Excellent performance last night too. Shakira was amazing on the Grammys. That was really fun to see. Okay, cool. Next, we have Purdy Higgs, who is our global head of streaming and digital partnerships at the independent label Dirty Hit, which is based in London. Purdy has overseen DSP strategy and Spotify partnerships across a number of campaigns, including the 1975, Wolf Alice, Bleachers, and beabadoobee, who was the award winner for Standout New Releases Storytelling for This Is How Tomorrow Moves. So Purdy, thank you for being here. And what was your release of 2024?
Hi, I'm going to be really obvious and say Brat. I had a Brat summer and then a Brat winter, and then will be Brat for foreseeable.
Of course. I love it. Who wasn't? We all tried. I was probably less Brat than you were, but I gave it my best effort. Next up, we have Ro, who's joining us from Virgin Music Group. She is the commercial marketing director for Virgin Music Group's direct assigned artists. And she also led the Spotify strategy for Clairo's first independently released album, Charm, which won our Standout Promoted Release Award. Ro, thank you for joining us. What was your album of 2024?
Okay, I don't want to steal Purdy's, but definitely Brad. But besides that, I loved Submarine by the Marias. I listen to it all the time. I'm obsessed with it.
Great picks. Great picks. Love it. We also have Chris Nanadic here, who works at Ignition Music as an artist manager for the last 11 years. They're a management company and a record label based in the UK and the US. Chris is English, but he lives in California, and he works with brand new developing artists like Sunday 1994, all the way through to giants like Oasis. And the award that he is here representing is the Standout Playlist Pitching Success for Tired Boy by Sunday 1994. Chris, what was your release of 2024?
Hello. Well, it's hard for me not to be listening to Torn by Natalie and Bruno at any given point. But if I put that aside and focus on some new music, then for last year, it was released. It came pretty late in the day. I think it was a December release, Bon Iver Speyside. For me, from that first chord, the first strum, I was just in, sold, game over. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, great pick. Yeah, that's maintaining. Bon Iver is just, it was a perfect fall music. Got me through and is still getting me through cold season. So great selection. And then closing it out last but not least, we have Ray Kurzeka, who is the Vice President of Streaming and Revenue at Interscope Capital and leads their overall strategy with Spotify. He works across incredible artists, many names that you'll recognize from the telecast last night, including Olivia Rodrigo, Kendrick Lamar, Lady Gaga, Billie Eilish, and of course, Gracie Abrams. And today he's here to talk about the massive year that Gracie Abrams had in 2024 and the partnership with Spotify that was a major part of that success. The award that he's representing is the Standout Integrated Marketing Strategy for The Secret of Us by Gracie Abrams. And Ray, what was your standout release of 2024?
Oh, thanks, Jesse. Hi, everyone. I would have to say Jamie XX in Waves got heavy rotation for me for last year. Most definitely.
Great pick. Excellent release. Wow. Top picks all around, y'all. And if you haven't listened to any of those, crawl out from under the rock that you're living under. Go listen to them. They're great releases. Okay, cool. So now that we're done with the intros, we are going to move on to the meat of our discussion here. Obviously, everyone on the call today from the panelist section are award winners, so they have a lot of insight into amazing ways to work with Spotify. So we're going to go through one at a time and kind of drill in with each of them on some of the strategies they employed and the ways that they found success through those strategies. So we'll go in the order of the introductions. I'm going to start with Karina. And if you would, could you just introduce a little bit more about the release and the artist that you won the award for and where that artist is at in their career and kind of how you approach the beginning stages of this?
All right, I will keep it as short as possible, but giving you as much information as possible as well. I would like to start highlighting my constant admiration for Kenya Oz. She's an artist deeply dedicated to her audience, constantly creating music, and with a growing fan base across Latin markets. Probably Kenya Oz has one of the most powerful Latin fan base nowadays. You should definitely check her out. This award is for her third studio album, Pink Aura. It's special because it's like the first album where Kenya included collabs. So it's like showcasing her versatility and creativity. So that's why we were so proud of her. And yeah, like we were so surprised about this award.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, fantastic to be able to showcase versatility like that. And obviously, such a standout success. As you were setting up this release, what were some of your initial goals, and how did you approach building out some of those goals for the project?
Well, every project we want to do it like fully tailored to the artist. We analyze their profile, audience, and the specific goals of the release. In this case, for Pink Aura, one of our main goals was to maximize the use of the new Countdown Pages tool. It was really new. The feature was really new at the time in Mexico, at least in Mexico. We released, for those who don't know the release, we released Pink Aura back in April last year. So in that time, it was really new, the countdown page. So it was, we wanted keep building the excitement and get as many free saves as possible from Kenya's loyal fandom.
Yeah, it's a great shout. And you already got ahead of my next question. I was going to kind of talk about that pre-release period, which is definitely something we're focused on Spotify. So, with the countdown page, what was your initial strategy there? How early in did you launch that? Was it coupled with a single? And was there anything else that you used to kind of promote that pre-release period on Spotify?
Well, we wanted to use like the tool, like the countdown page tool, and our focus was like, to educate both the theme and both the fans about its functionality. The tool keeps fans engaged by showing the days, hours, minutes until the album is like out. So that kind of excitement was really powerful for the fandom. We wanted like to keep them sharing in social media like how many days were left until the album was released, and that kind of boost on social media was really powerful for them as well. We started the countdown page at least 1 month prior the album release in this case.
Nice. Okay, cool. That month is really nice. That's helpful. You can have multiple touch points in that lead up period. And then release week itself, did you have a release week checklist? And what did you do to kind of cut through that noise in a very busy period of time?
During the release week, we wanted to use like tools also included in the countdown page, like the clips ones. They were really instrumental into sharing exclusive content. We wanted to keep having a deep connection between Kenya's and their fandom, her fandom, sorry. So we wanted to share exclusive content that it will be only found on these clips. These clips reminded on Spotify, allowing for continued engagement even after the initial release. So to keep it short, we made some clips that were only available on Spotify. So Kenya will be sharing on her social media like, hey, if you want to know more aspects about my album, about the behind the scenes of the album, you should definitely check them out in my Spotify profile. So she sent her fans into her Spotify profile. So that was really, really a good best practice.
Yeah, that's great. Connecting kind of all the different channels of messaging to draw back to the place where people are really listening to the music and continuing to have that anchor of messaging super well connected. And then did you have any strategies to continue the momentum for as long as possible? It's easy for fans to move on quickly. So how did you keep folks coming back to the table so that they continue to engage with that release?
Well, social media played a really big role in organically amplifying the release as fans continue to share and engage. So I think we use her powerful social media. Definitely check her out. She's really constantly sharing updates and sharing her Spotify profile in her stories, in her Instagram. So she's always constantly driving her fans from the social media channels into her Spotify profile because they will find some new updates, some new exclusive photos, new exclusive clips in the Spotify profile. So that's what. So social media played a big role.
Yeah, it makes sense. Absolutely. It's a helpful messaging point, obviously, where all the fans are spending most of their time anyway. So, really nice way to connect the dots there. And then within all of this, with the strategies you employed, how much of what you were doing was pre-planned and really structured in advance versus reactive to the audience behaviors or how things were performing in real time?
You mean like how many of these strategies were really planned and how many we were like reacting at the time?
Yes, exactly.
Well, with this kind of fandom that is really powerful, they are like one of the most powerful fan base in Latin America. We have to keep reacting at the time. If they really love some kind of content, we keep doing it. We keep listening to the fan. It's really important. And also Kenya is really like listening to them. Like she also suggests stuff. Like she's like, hey, I read on Twitter, on X. I read on X that they are like really like this strategy. They really like when I shared my behind the scenes during a video. So that's why the artist is really listening to the fans, like reading what they have to say. So with this kind of powerful fandom, we have to react at a time.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Yeah, because if fans are asking and saying we love the behind the scenes stuff, that really pushes you to upload more of that as clips and to create that connection on platform and have that drawing point. So super helpful. Thank you. I appreciate the overview. And now I'll dig into it a bit of the same with Purdy. So Purdy, if you wouldn't mind walking us through a little bit about the release and the artist that you won this award for, and where they're at in their career when you were starting this process.
Yeah, of course. So I worked on beabadoobee's third studio album, This Is How Tomorrow Moves. I've worked with Bee since at least 5 years ago, before she released her debut album, and it's been an absolutely wild experience seeing her blossom and discover, like, well, just become a star essentially and a global artist. Spotify have been an integral part of the journey, and we've been really lucky to work really closely with the team from early doors. When we started this campaign, we were in a brilliant position where we have a really engaged audience. So essentially, our main priority was trying to make sure that we were utilizing every platform correctly and bespoke to the campaign, kind of to what Karina was saying earlier. So with B, our approach to Spotify was to utilize the things and tools that are on the platform, but make the most out of what B does best and what performs best with beabadoobee as an artist, which is her short form content. B has had multiple viral tracks go live, and it's changed the trajectory of her career. And she's very popular online on multiple platforms. And so the ability to use clips both during the countdown phase and then the post-release phase to continue explaining more behind the album was really integral, because we were driving people to consume video on the platform where they consume music. So it was kind of a perfect partnership. We worked very closely with social teams and B to make sure that we were consistently posting a variety of content on Spotify, whether that was stuff that was exclusive on there or just replicating social posts from adjacent platforms. Then when we were in post-album release mode, we pivoted to a bespoke track by track. So the only place that a beabadoobee fan could go and hear B talking to camera, chatting about all her inspirations and the meanings behind every song, was by going directly to the album product. And then you're there, you're watching the clips, and then you're streaming the album. So it kind of worked perfectly. But yeah, it also meant that the album campaign had a lot of longevity. I think it can sometimes be very anticlimactic working on an album campaign, because you spend like months and months building it up, and then you put it out, and then you're just like, peace out. So it was actually a really nice way to keep the campaign going, and work again with the Spotify team, but also just be able to serve fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great shout. And you covered a lot of the tentpole kind of moments here with so when you talk about the album track by track, is that lived in the form of clips?
Yeah.
Was that like 30 seconds per track, or were some of them more long form? Were you doing multiple clips on a per track basis? What was the
We stuck to keeping it one per track, because we wanted from the user experience to have it be really clear. So like the video title was the name of the song, and then that was it. So it actually sat really nicely on the platform. Obviously there is the option to do more, but I think from a stylistic perspective, also, I mean, a point that we didn't really touch on is B's audience leans very heavily to Gen Z, which is one of those mythical words that all labels and management companies are obsessed with, tapping into a Gen Z audience. But Gen Z audience famously have quite short attention spans. So 30 seconds is actually quite impressive if you can get someone to stay on for that long.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a helpful guardrail to put up as you're trying to appeal to a younger audience, 100%. Within all of these approaches, with goal setting, was that something that was discussed in advance and these strategies were built around specific goals? Or was that something that you're continuing to measure as you go based on user reactions, fan base reactions? Curious how goals and goal setting kind of came into all this for you.
I mean, I personally, despite the fact that I work in streaming, which is obsessed with numbers, I'm like not a numbers person. So that was technically no, but I think more what we have, and I think this is very much, from my background in an independent label and working with the artists that I do, B was really proud of making like an album. She's very much an album artist. And I think, you know, it's very easy for people to say that, you know, people don't care as much about the concept of an album in the same way that they do now, but I don't think that's true. And I think what we wanted to do was be able to utilize streaming platforms in a way that like put forward the product as an album to be consumed in its full form. And I think clips were really useful for that, because it allowed us to communicate the world of the album on platform. So I think honestly that was a main goal, was to be able to use the tools and to be able to market to Bee's audience whilst honoring the concept that it's a full body of work that she was really proud of and that we were really proud to be putting out in the world. And then obviously in terms of like stats targets, we just wanted like a hell of a lot of streams and loads of people to buy the album.
Love that. Absolutely. As many as possible.
Yeah.
And with the pre-release period itself, so how far in advance did you start teasing this out? And what was your runway between kind of that initial advancement, announcement moment to the actual album release itself? How did you sustain during that period?
I mean, it's a big question. I think we were very lucky because, you know, again, and this taps into a lot of the things that Karina was saying, that we very heavily utilized our countdown page. And, you know, we ended up surpassing like, 160,000 pre-saves on Spotify, which was amazing. And we were able to partner with the team on like bespoke out of home, and we were able to do really cool things on platform. But I think honestly, if we're looking really practically, and I'm aware that like a lot of people who are on this call might be like looking to release music or looking at lining up their own release schedules with artists, etc. We really received a lot of longevity through waterfalling our tracks on platform. I think it was something that we really benefited from. And for anyone who isn't familiar with the expression, it's by when you release the second song in the campaign, you'll put the first song that you released underneath. That was a really strong way to see continued uplift across the campaign. And by the time you get to release, you really see the benefits from it. But generally speaking, from a socials and clips perspective, it was just it was a good routine of teasing on platform, driving the countdown page, and then release.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way of approaching it. We've seen a lot of labels have success with that waterfall approach, so spot on there. And then similarly, you know, to what I was asking Karina about, with these strategies you have in place, how many of them were premeditated and really structured in advance of the campaign versus how reactive are you to audience demands in real time, and how much is this changing based on performance?
That's really interesting. I mean, what's great about Spotify, like for artists and like clips and stuff, is like you can handle it all on the back end yourself. So we can be really reactive in a way that we wouldn't necessarily be able to potentially previously. So we are super reactive. But that being said, I think everything does still, to a point, follow quite a tried and trusted formula, which is essentially just driving back to Spotify, driving back to the product. And the realistically, like the ability to pre-save an album in app has like massively changed the way that labels and artists approach sharing Spotify links on social media. I think it's been really interesting as Countdown has become more and more popular, how quickly fans have adopted it, and it's become completely normal now for people to do that, and it's like an instinct, even though it's a new function. So I actually think we're able to just use the tools really quickly and be reactive, because we can upload the stuff ourselves and because the fans are used to that user experience already.
Yeah, no, that's a great shout. Appreciate it. Super helpful overview. Thank you. I'm being conscious of time, so I'm moving us along, but we're going to get into a lot more in the general discussion as well. So next, I'm going to pivot over to Ro, if you wouldn't mind walking us through a little bit more about Clairo's album Charm. I'm very curious if you could tell us a bit more about where Clairo was at as y'all started out this process, and then what kind of you did with the goal setting and your approach to goal setting for Clairo's release.
Yeah. So first of all, it was just an incredible body of work. Like sonically, musically, it was just really, really impressive. And for us, you know, she hadn't released an album in 3 years, but she's always been very relevant, like literally 2 months before the campaign started and we even announced that the album was coming. there was like a TikTok that went viral of this girl who was like sitting in the back of a cab in the middle of the night asking the taxi driver to play Bex, which was hilarious. So that kind of already moved more of the previously active audience back into active because people were getting reminded of the song. So, and that was like a huge part of the campaign, was reactivating the previously active audience. So, yeah, you know, she sold out so many tours, and she just has an extremely rabid fan base, in addition to this album being the first, like, you know, album that she's ever released independently. So us partnering with her was really, really special, especially because our team also worked Immunity and her first kind of songs through Fader label. So yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, that's so helpful to have that moment that kind of galvanizes an audience to begin with. And then you can really dive into like, okay, how are we telling the story about this new body of work? Um, as you were digging into that kind of pre-release period, what was your approach to the timing there? How were you able to build hype for the release? And what kind of tools did you employ along the way?
So, you know, a lot of the hype, like it came from her. She was doing an excellent job on social media, like staying true to her own vibe. Like she was writing like notes in a journal and posting it on stories, which was awesome. And then when the first single came out, that was when we launched the countdown page and all the other like pre-save, announced the album date, etc. So after that happened, we ran a showcase for the first single, Sexy to Someone, that targeted previously active and light listeners. So we could get both people who, you know, had been active listeners in the past 2 years who love her, but then also light listeners who maybe only listen to like Sophia or Bags or her hits. So yeah.
Smart approach. It's a nice way to like tap into some of our paid features to be able to really like zero in on that audience that you're trying to convert for this period of time. And it sounds like it's very based in goal setting too. You had a very specific audience in mind that you wanted to convert for specific user behaviors. So you set up all this campaign, you had great momentum. Within the release week itself, then what was your approach to capitalizing on the great momentum you'd created and having a really impactful release week?
Yeah, so basically, like we had a budget for the showcase and the ads that we had. And, you know, we didn't want to put it all at once. Like I just didn't think that would be a smart use of her money because again, she's independent. So it's, you know, it's self-funded at the end of the day. So we split up based on segment how I like ran the campaign based on date. So I just kind of stifled out the budget so that like, you know, someone is already listening to it on Release Radar, Discover Weekly, or you know, Juna, a song on her album that was literally track 7, went viral immediately. So that also helped the lean forward happen. So then you know, spacing out the campaign and the budget made the dollar go way further, and we ran it ex-US too. Our global team was really involved because that's also Virgin's mission, is to be an independent artist partner that works across the globe. You know, so yeah.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a huge global element to that. And I feel like the sustained momentum that release was felt for months afterwards. How did y'all continue to keep this as part of the conversation? And were there specific strategies employed, or was that primarily fan base driven?
It was, I'm honestly, I'm just so proud of Claire and how much she wanted this album to succeed because she's independent. So a lot of it really came from her because she has a very distinct um way that she likes to do things. She's very like behind the curtain, a little silly. So, you know, she's not the type of person to want like more showcases and more marquees, but our digital team worked with me really closely as I was analyzing the consumption. I was looking at what song was really getting surpassed, especially because the focus track that we had was actually different. So it was just, yeah, it was an incredible campaign where the digital team, the marketing team, and the team that I'm part of really, really honed in and worked together.
Yeah, it sounds like an incredible collaboration across a lot of cross-functional teams to make this one a success at many levels. And my next question sounds like you're answering already a bit there, but it sounds like you were very reactive to how things were going. How quickly were you changing your strategies based on audience behaviors versus trying to sustain something that maybe you'd already kicked off?
I mean, honestly, across all campaigns, when I'm running a showcase or a marquee, again, like my main job at Virgin is to work with our direct signed artists who are all independent. They don't have a huge major label budget. So I am literally looking at the results like every day, sometimes a few hours apart, stopping campaigns if a segment isn't doing well, and then pivoting. Honestly, on this one, every single segment outperformed everything. So I didn't have to do it this time. But for a lot of other of my artists, that's what I'm always doing. I'm stopping, I'm starting, I'm, emailing my amazing Spotify marquee team, Jordan Snyder and Chris Dimas, to get a campaign going immediately. So shout out to them. But yeah, it was an incredible campaign. We're really proud of how it landed.
Amazing. Yeah, fantastic work. And shout out to Jordan and Chris. They're the ghosts. So, love those two. Thank you. That's really helpful insight. Chris, I'm going to pivot over to you now and talk a little bit about Sunday 1994, which was one of my favorite discoveries last year. Absolutely incredible.
Awesome.
Can you talk us a little bit more about Sunday 1994 and how you found them and where they were at and when you started working with them?
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a bit different to, I think, everyone else on this call in the sense that this track, Tired Boy, was the first track the band ever released. So they basically did not exist before this. There was no monthly listeners, there was no data to go on. There was literally just an idea and some excitement with me and the band. And it was actually just under a year ago to the day that the band launched as well, and then this track came out a week later. So releasing this track was solely about an introduction and about discovery, and that is to everyone. That was to industry, that was to fans, that was like the purpose of this track, just kind of setting up shop for the band. So in terms of the pitching tool, and obviously that was the award that Tired Boy won. That really was an extension of discovery as well. So we were just trying to think about ways in which we can best introduce this band to anyone. And the band themselves were so sort of in tune with this idea and had such a clear vision and idea about what they wanted to be artistically and in terms of their aesthetic, that even before we launched and before we did that first pitch and before the Instagram was launched or whatever, the band had spent probably, I'd say, nearly a year planning everything out on a base marketing level, thinking about the logo, the artwork, the imagery, the aesthetic, making videos, banking videos, working on cut downs, doing absolutely every single thing themselves, from the music all the way through to any marketing element, working on their language, working out what they were going to say. So when it came to the pitch, I think there was quite a clearly defined sort of identity to things within the pitch, but everything else that was around it had to be an extension of that, because there's no music, there's no history to draw on. So every sort of asset that we did have, be it a photo or the bio in Spotify or anything, was doing a lot of heavy lifting because there was nothing else to exist, right? So all these other elements were doing a lot of the talking for us. So we had to ensure that it was as good as it possibly could be and could have the highest impact possible. And that, if someone was had been drawn to the artist through the pitch, that then like path of discovery, which is like something I always do, right? When I'm listening to a new artist, or if I'm listening to something, I discover something on Spotify, first thing I do is I go and look at the credits, just because I'm just curious. Second thing I do is I scroll through, go to the Instagram whilst I'm listening, look at the Instagram and just like get the vibe a bit more. So we wanted to ensure that that like whole journey that someone's going to take from within Spotify through to like their world was going to be concise and was just really, really defined. And the band were wholly responsible for that themselves. And that's kind of how we wanted to start this and how we've tried to continue to build it out.
That's amazing. Yeah, super well baked out. I mean, I remember when that release came out, it felt like there was a really clear vision here, and there was like a very specific value proposition that fans could lean into and that folks could really resonate with and connect with. With all that planning, I mean, you're talking about a year of work here setting this up.
Yeah.
Then the release comes out and you're getting the fan reaction in real time. How much of what you had planned out were you able to sustain during that period versus how much did you have to pivot based on something that worked that was surprising or fan reactions that were interesting?
Yeah, the plan was always, and again, it was an idea from the band who, you know, 9 times out of 10 have the best ideas. They didn't just want to have one track that came out to set them up because, you know, I think then if it's just like an editor's looking at it from like the playlist perspective as well, as they're going, what's next? Is there even going to be something else, right? There has to be a story and there has to be a path and there has to be a narrative. So they set up and this is what took some time as well to prepare for. They had a 6-track EP, so that was set up so that there was always a plan for what's next. So we were moving quite quickly, and we saw that actually releasing quite a lot of music for a brand new band. You know, they launched in February, released a 6-track EP in May, and we saw that actually having that volume of tracks was so successful that what we did was double down on it by 3 months later doing a deluxe version of the EP with another 3 tracks. So within the band existing in, I think, 7 months, we'd put 9 tracks out. And so I think we thought that 6 was going to be a lot, but it was actually really working for us because we saw that fans were liking different tracks, and having that kind of scope of content was so important that we were like, let's keep on, the band can do it, let's keep on putting tracks out. And then the other interesting thing is, and something that I talk about with the band a lot, and it's this like thing I talk about called like multiple lives of tracks. And I think that Tired Boy was the first ever track they released. And already now, 11 months later, we're already in like the 3rd life of the track. So we had planned for this introduction. Then we had seen 6 months later that actually this track was bedding in and we needed to refocus on it. And then now we're going, okay, let's think about taking this track to radio because we have the data, we have the story, there's something going on here. So we're doing a full service to alternative AAA non-com. So that's like the 3rd tier life of this song, even within the first year of its existence. So I think that's something I always am trying to be conscious of, that, you know, like to Purdy's point earlier, when you put out an album, you know, it used to feel like it could be the end, but now it's like, okay, what's next? And you kind of have your vision for it, but you never really know, and you have to be open to what can happen. I think we've seen with this is we can move through these lives quite quickly these days, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, so many good gems there. I mean, it sounds like you're balancing 2 things simultaneously really well. The giving fans enough volume to really dig into and playing into the idea that was mentioned earlier about shorter attention span. So give as many people as many things as quickly as possible as you can to really sink their teeth into to build that fandom behavior, but also that a track can have a life that extends months and that looks different at different stages. So I think it's a really
100%.
interesting approach at both levels, that you're kind of balancing and holding both things simultaneously. With that initial release, like kind of zeroing back in on that moment, what was the goal? I know the idea was like you wanted people to be able to dig in there, but did you have specific metrics attached to that, or was that more open-ended?
You know, it's nice when you see like things start to grow. But truthfully, and again, to what Birdie was kind of saying, we were just like our main metric, we were just like running off vibes. Like when something's good, like, and you get these reactions between your friends, people you don't know, fans, the industry, and you can like actually feel something, that's when you know you're on to something. So whilst, you know, when we got certain playlists, that's a nice touch, or a bit of press, that's a nice touch, or radio play, it's a nice touch, or a spike in something, nice touch. We were like more more inspired by what we could actually like sense and feel. And that's that kind of feeling that when you start to build that momentum, that's what like when you wake up in the morning, that's what you're excited about more than, am I going to be up 25% today? You know what I mean? It's more like it's a feeling more than anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's like we are in a feeling business here. At the end of the day, we try to apply as much data to it as possible. There's nothing that can replicate really that feeling of like this is a palpable excitement. Thanks, Chris. This is super helpful. It's a really interesting overview. And Ray, last over to you. I'm really curious. I mean, Gracie Abrams had such a massive year, especially as things were closing out towards the end of the year. Pretty incredible all around. Can you tell us a bit more about where Gracie was at when you started really working with her on this campaign, and then how you started kind of setting up the idea of The Secret of Us?
Yeah, I mean, I was relatively new to Team Gracie the time we were getting into the album planning, and there was a lot of learning I had to do just about her, kind of like under the hood, understanding where the fan base was at, what they reacted to, what they were passionate about. Obviously, she had created a very meaningful foundation and cured, like cultivated a very meaningful grouping of super fans. So really the conversation around Gracie and this new album is like, what was going to be the next gear for her? Like she had released a prior project, a number of great singles. So really it was kind of like pie in the sky around this next album and what that was going to lead to. So ultimately, when we were setting up the music, and I think as we get into sort of the conversation about the tools available on platform and countdown pages and clips, I think we all want art or fans to gravitate around, the new song from an artist or the new project from an artist. But, the one thing with Gracie is like she had released phenomenal music already that was only a couple years old. So in kind of the setup phase for The Secret of Us, it was like, how do we bring potential new people like into her catalog? And I think when you have like opportunities on platform, like now that you have a visual component in clips, it's like, how do you utilize something like that the artist leans into, that fans can then come in, or potential fans can come in and sort of like create that emotional attachment without having a brand new album out. And so what we ended up seeing is, various catalog records of hers like starting to kind of like creep into the charts in that pre-release phase before we even release Risk, because that was sort of part of our overall strategy. And I mean, even marketing and digital was leaning into that globally. So, we were seeding things kind of in the creator space, the short form space. Gracie was leaning into it with her own content, but again, it was sort of highlighting her favorites from her past releases as we were going into setting up the project. So that was a big goal for us. And then ultimately, sort of what you look at is when you're coming to release that first single or make that album announcement or put that countdown page up, like the whole idea is that you have sort of an entire new audience to base off of outside of the super fan group that she had already built herself, basically.
Yeah, that's a great point. Honestly, thinking about that pre-release period as before you are even talking about the new album in any capacity, like the pre-release period is happening for months in advance of that as you warm up the audience and have them draw attention to fans who are discovering an artist for the first time and falling in love with the catalog, and then prepared for whatever this new release moment is. They're really primed and available. So within the release week itself, I'm really curious about this project specifically because it felt like it became so ubiquitous quickly and grew really fast. Within that release week and then beyond, what were some of the strategies you employed to be able to captivate on that buzz and really raise it to whole new heights as Gracie was continuing to build?
I think for her, it was more making Gracie a global artist. I think we had so much success in the US. So I think the conversation really was about like, how do we get this music to resonate in markets well beyond the US? So you look at parts of the world like Southeast Asia, where there's like a sincere pop affinity in terms of just fandom. You look at, making waves in Australia, making waves in the UK, like in other key markets in Europe. So I think, sort of honing in on release week was, taking the few songs that we had and that we were focusing on. And then it was just really full team effort and making sure that, we were driving the narrative as such, and that, our team talking to sort of the wider labels across the world, touching Gracie and making sure, they were sort of pushing that narrative. Yeah, and again, it was a mix of like focusing on the track she had with Taylor, focusing on the very first single, Risk, which, you know, it's the very first song that comes out in the rollout cycle, but it still has like plenty of life left in it. So we kind of had this like 3 to 4 song approach as we were, you know, working these records across basically every facet of places you would find discovery. You know, and ultimately, I think from there, it was really getting a sense over the first week, first 14 days of like what people were gravitating toward. Because again, you always set out with best intention of this might be the song we identify as the one, but it actually turned out to be something completely different out of the 4 that we were even talking about. So that was kind of actually the mystery and the magic of Gracie upon releasing the album is I Love You, I'm Sorry, like just completely came out of left field. We had no idea that would have been ultimately the song that drove the next 2-3 months of Gracie's story last year.
Yeah, it's fascinating. When you have a case like that rise up, that just a surprise out of left field, and it's really starting to take off. What are those conversations like, especially at a place like Interscope Capital? You're digging into, you have all these best laid plans, and then you're surprised by something out of nowhere. How do you approach pivoting on that? And do you apply some of the strategies that maybe you were going to use for something else? Or is it, let's restart, let's break this down and do something different entirely?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, you know, again, it's how you're contextualizing things to the fans. So I think first and foremost, you know, I think Gracie in creating her own content would probably lean in heavier on, you know, using one song clip versus another. And I think, you know, the way we'd encourage fans to create in the short form space would sort of lean toward one song versus the other. But, you know, ultimately, again, we all want like one hit single, but the other thing is you just can't lose sight of like the whole body of work. And I think there's just plenty of real estate in the world for, you know, multiple songs to work at any given moment. So, you know, it's a bit of it's kind of a fun balancing act. But it's also like the best problem you can have on your hands is when you have 3 or 4 songs working and they could be sonically different. So they hit different spaces of people that have different music tastes. Some lean more acoustic, some lean more up-tempo pop, some lean more singer-songwriter. So, you know, we saw Gracie touch like 3 or 4 different spaces between mainstream pop, even to like a Roots Rising, like Wanderlust playlist type to just a straight, you know, full-blown like acoustic type mood list. So you think about sort of where the curation intersected with the campaign, it was across like 4 or 5 different spaces over time.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes sense. It was definitely very expansive. It was really fascinating to see all the ways that resonated with different audiences at different levels. Um, I'm realizing now we're like already at /past time, which is crazy because I feel like we didn't get to a lot of the other conversation questions that I had. But for folks who can stick around, for those who have to jump, this is recorded. We're going to send around the recording here soon. But those who can stick around, I'd love to close out just hearing some thoughts from y'all on 2025 trends and what you are paying attention to this year for some of your marketing strategy. And then if you have any advice for folks on this call who are still tuned in for ways that they can have an impact on Spotify. This one could be relatively open-ended. So if someone's feeling inspired, feel free to jump in, but would love to hear what you're seeing and excited about this year.
Can I jump in on one thing in kind of light of the Grammys last night with my kind of bit of advice? I think that what last night proved with the best new artists, with basically all of them being 10 years in the making, some of them longer, just goes to show that it is such a long road. And the best thing you can do is to be able to practice patience and try and run your own race and realize that it is a seriously long road. And that to try and just celebrate the little victories every step of the way as best you can, because it is a bloody long and winding road.
Great point. Yeah, appreciate that insight.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I remember like my first job in music, I was an A&R assistant, and my boss would always say like minimum it takes 3 to 5 years to somewhat break an artist. And I remember like, you know, he signed Teddy Swims and that took 5 years. And so like to Chris's point, it's all about being patient. And also like, you know, the Grammy winners, like they were all women. And I think now like women are, you know, winning and becoming executives, and it's great.
Preach. Yeah. Very, very incredible representation on that last night. It was really exciting, encouraging to see.
I would just add in one thing, like stay in close touch with your fans, even if you're starting from scratch, and even if it's 10 people that you respond and hit from time to time, as simple as a reply on a YouTube comment, a reply to an IG comment, or anything like that. I think if you, all the artists we discussed that we're all kind of here talking about, like the one through narrative, regardless of what level each artist is at, is that they have cultivated such a special fan base. And you look at all the things we do, even with Spotify or, you know, other marketing, that is like the driving engine of all of it. So if you're making phenomenal music and you're sort of just speaking to that group of fans on a regular, semi-regular basis, you know, there's a big formula to win there. And it's not even a formula, that's kind of lack of a better word, but I would just encourage that all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep in sight on that 100%.
I think that's key, what Ray said. The listen to your fans is the key of success. Like we'll learn from the fans every day. And also collaboration and clear communication with your team is also key. Like if you have something that is really like you don't really like some stuff, you can really communicate it and you have like clear communications with them and you know improve the team network.
Totally. Especially as you, I mean, a lot of folks here are working on artists who have big teams now. So being able to keep that vision clear and consistent across while focusing on the fan experience is the challenge, but y'all have done it really effectively.
And I feel like my thing would just be to not rush releases. I think I personally have like fallen foul of an urgency to feel like you need to get things out, but you can only put things out once, so it makes sense to do it properly. And that means, you know, like making sure that it's pitched correctly in Spotify for Artists and it's set up properly on socials, etc. I would just always want to make sure that people are so keen, like so excited about our music that they don't go through the proper resources, which sounds so boring. But I feel like my main thing is just to make sure that people don't rush releases because you can only put them out once.
So true. Yeah, and it's easy to feel an urgency and the, you know, attention economy to force things through and to not necessarily give everything its
Oh
proper.
yeah, unless it's going viral, in which case put it out. Like ASAP.
Yeah. Jump on the trend, get it
Yes. Do the dance.
Yes. Well, appreciate y'all. Thank you again. Such an amazing group, and congrats on the awards that y'all very deservedly won. And hope that everyone who was able to tune in gained a little something from this. Again, we'll share the recording around soon. But hope everyone is having a good 2025 so far. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks, y'all.